Today we're going to make a photo knit pillow like this using the knitting machine and connecting it to one of the computers here in the Maker Lab. So when you get to the knitting machine, you're going to find some directions. And it's going to tell you every step of what you need to do in order to make a pillow like this and how to connect the knitting machine to the computer. There's even some web links here showing you some websites where you can get some answers if you have any questions or any problems with the machine. That will help you find the answers to any of your questions. We first have to plug the machine in for power, so there's a little place for the power cord here on the right side of the machine. You just plug it in there and then plug it into the wall for some power. Then you're going to plug this cord into the knitting machine and then the other side into the laptop. And you're just going to want to make sure it's in there nice and solid into the knitting machine, so it's in a nice good central location. It's sort of pressed in real good, but yeah, you're just plugging it in. Now we're going to set our carriage to the tension that we need. I'm going to be using this navy and green yarn, and it's a little thicker than some of the fingering away yarn that I've been using. Because of that, I'm going to go ahead and increase the number on my tension dial so that it's a little looser than 5. I'm going to move it all the way up to 8, and our first task that we need to do is we need to cast on. I'm going to be doing a 1x1 cast on. So I used the 1x1 cast on comb, pushed up every other needle, and then I'm going to thread the carriage and move it across the bed. This project will be 140 stitches. So the needle bed has 0 in the center and the numbers go up on both the right and the left. So 140, you're going to need 70 stitches on either side of the bed. So to do this cast on, I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to put it here in the front of the carriage. And then I'm going to hold on to the tail of it underneath the carriage and sort of back towards the table a little bit. And then I'm going to move the carriage from one side of the needle bed to the other side. Now I'll take my cast on comb and I'm going to hang it from the little loops that I just made with that yarn on the needle bed, and then attach some claw weights to it. Now use the flat side of that same needle pusher and I'll push all the needles forward. So now they're all those 140 stitches and needles are now moved up to the same position on the needle bed. Just going to make sure that my yarn ball has some nice loose tension, so I'm just going to kind of unravel it just a little bit and leave it piled up gently so that it feeds nice and clean through the tension unit. And we're just going to do like 4 or 5 rows of simple stitching, good stockinette stitch, just to kind of start off our project. And we're going to end with the carriage over on the left side of the bed, just past the little U-turn. Now that the carriage is just past that U-turn over on the left side of the machine, I'm going to rotate the dial to KC1. Now I'm going to turn on the machine, and now I'm going to open the image to track software. For this project, we're going to do a width of 140 stitches, right? Because that's how many needles we chose across the bed. We want it to be 2 colors. Go into File Preferences and just make sure the right model of knitting machine is selected in the software. These knitting machines are KH930s, so you just want to make sure the right machine is selected. And then you hit the Select Image button and you select the image that you have on the computer. This software can handle a lot of different file formats, so I find that JPEGs work great. And you can see here it gives you a little preview of how it's going to look. It's very pixelated, of course, because every knit stitch is like a different pixel. And I can see here on my image to track software, it says load and knit tracks 1 through 3. So we know that for this project, there's going to be 3 tracks that we'll be knitting. Now we'll go back to the knitting machine and we're going to enter a sequence. And it's all detailed here on this laminated sheet that's in the machine. What we'll press is CE 551 step 1 step. And then you wait a minute until it makes a beep sound. That's when you know you're ready to knit. That first yarn that we used should be the lighter of your 2 colors, and it's in the A slot in your carriage. So at that front part of your carriage, you see the 2 spots there, you want that one in the A spot. Now we're going to take the carriage and we're going to move it over to the right side of the knitting machine. Now after your first row, you're going to have to thread in your second color, the darker of your 2. And what you need to do is press that top button. So in the center, underneath the tension dial, there's 2 buttons there. And then thread in color B in the color B slot. And then make sure the end of that is nice and secure somewhere so that it doesn't get loose. So as you knit, this little window here is going to tell you what row you are in the project, okay? And as you knit, you're really going to be just keeping an eye on the balls of yarn to make sure that it's all flowing nicely. One of the biggest hiccups you're going to bump into is if your yarn is getting stuck in the tension unit or stuck on the ball or something like that. So you just want to make sure that you are keeping an eye on the balls and making sure that the yarn is moving smoothly, especially for a project like this where the computer is doing so much of the work for you. Also here on the laptop, you can see that track 1 has 18 rows. And we'll definitely know when we're at the end of that track because it's going to beep. And that's when we know it's going to be time to input the next track. And here in our example project, you can see on the laptop that the whole bottom of the piece of the image is the dark color, the black. And when you look at our work on the machine, you see a whole lot of that green yarn, which is our lighter color. And the reason that's happening is because the machine is knitting the darker yarn, the dark blue navy color, and the green is just being carried along the back. When you work on the knitting machine, you're always looking at the wrong side of the work. The right side of the work where your image is facing the table. So it's actually a little tricky or surprising because you can't really see the finished piece until it's off the machine. So it can be a little bit of a surprise at the end to see sort of just like how well it turned out. And it's always going to move from the bottom of the piece up to the top. So it's going to start from the bottom of the image and work its way up to our bug's head. So here we go. The machine beeped. And we can see that we just finished row 18. And remember, there are 18 rows in track 1. So that means we're ready to move on to track 2. So what we need to do is we need to input track 2 into the knitting machine. And this is detailed on these notes that you'll find in the knitting machines here at the Maker Lab. But what you'll input is CE551 step 2 step. So that number in between those steps indicates which track number you want the machine to learn next. So we did the CE551. And then step 2 step this time. So the machine beeped, so it got the tracks, it understands what the rows need to be, and we can see here on the computer that there are 96 rows in this track. So I'm going to continue knitting here the track 2, the 96 rows. The machine will know to switch between those two colors because they're both fed into the right spots on the carriage. So I don't have to do anything with my yarn except for make sure that the balls of yarn aren't getting tangled up. And then when I'm ready to do track 3, I'll just input in the CE551 step 3 step, which will get me my third track programmed into the knitting machine. Okay, so we are filming this over the course of a couple of days, and so the one that I was working on initially I actually finished, and I even finished a whole second one. So here is the bug side for the second pillow, and you can see what that bug turned out to be, only this time I did it in black and gray instead of navy and green. And then over here on the machine, I have the second side for the pillow. It has sort of a sun eye motif. Again, I'm looking at the wrong side of the work. The right side of the work is facing the table. And here you're going to see these really long floats of yarn, right? So that's all that kind of string of yarn on the reverse of the work. There are ways you can secure those and things that you can do, but I'm not going to get complicated and get into it right now because we're making a pillow. So if this were going to be a sweater or something else you were going to pull over your body and wear, this would be a huge problem because your hands would get stuck on it. So now that I'm done knitting it up and we're finished using the computer, we can go ahead and power off the knitting machine and we can put the laptop away and all of that. All we have to do now is bind it off the machine, and this is the same method I've used on the other projects that we've talked about with the Maker Lab, and that is you use your single transfer tool and you pull out the needle, push it in. You've now transferred the stitch from that needle onto your transfer tool. You hold it vertical so you don't risk dropping that stitch. And you move over to one to the left. And now you wrap your working yarn around the hook and push that in. So now the wrapped yarn that went around the hook has gone all the way through those 2 stitches. And then you're going to repeat in the same fashion all the way down the needle bed until all of the stitches have been taken off of the bed. And then after you've bound it off the machine, it'll be time to seam up the pillow. Okay, so I am back and I have finished seaming off 3 sides of the pillow. I'm on the very last side now. We've covered seaming in some other videos that we've made about the knitting machine here at the Maker Lab, but you're going to take the one piece of your fabric with the right side facing you and put them onto the hooks on the needle bed. And then you're going to take the other piece of fabric with the right side facing the machine so that the two right sides are facing each other. And you're going to put it on the same needle hooks on the bed. And then you're going to bind them off. Just like you did a bind off, you're going to go ahead and but this time you've got 2 stitches on each hook instead of 1. And it's the same process though of pulling them out, wrapping the yarn around the hook, pushing the needle in so that the wrapped yarn makes its way through those stitches on the hook. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that here. And I just sort of had this last bit here on the left just kind of hanging off of the pegs on the knitting machine just to keep it out of my way and keep the tension nice and even. I don't plan on totally seaming this entire side because I do need to stuff it with the pillow. So I'm just going to do a couple more stitches here to seam it up, and then I'll take it off the machine and complete it. I'm going to remove the weights, and I'm going to give myself a nice long tail of yarn so that I can use that to seam up the pillow after I get it stuffed. So here for this last one, I'm just going to open it up a little bit and then pull the tail through to make a knot. And now we're going to turn it right side out. So again, yes, there are lots of floats going on here. There are ways you can control them if they really upset you, but they won't be noticeable once it's in its pillow shape. And if you do want to make a sweater, there are ways you can secure them with tapestry needles or with the little latch hook that comes with the knitting machine. But we're not going to worry about it with this project. It'll be fine. I'm just going to make sure as I turn this the right side out that I'm keeping my long tail that I saved outside of the pillow so that I have it accessible so that I can seam it up when I'm all done stuffing it. Here's my pillow insert. This one happened to have a little zipper where I could add or remove some of the fluff that's inside of it, which is really handy. So I'm going to make sure that my open corner of my project is lined up with that zipper so that after I stuff it, if I decide, oh, I wish it had a bit more stuffing or maybe it's too full, I can open up that zipper and have easy access to it so I can open it and then add some more stuffing or take some away or whatever I need to do if I feel like it's necessary. So it's nice to have that option. So I'm going to keep that available. Now I'm going to use a big-eyed tapestry needle to seam up this last little bit. This feels fine to me. If I needed to add some more fluff, I certainly could, but I think this feels good and I think I'm ready to sew it up. So I just have to stitch this little bit up and my pillow will be done.